After almost 30 years, the Purple Line is finally getting an expansion. Officially called the D Line, the Purple Line last saw an extension in 1996. In that time, Metro Rail has gone through a remarkable period of growth, which has made the Purple Line look kind of short. Most of the line is shared with the Red Line, with only two stations of its own in Koreatown. And for a quarter century now, countless Metro riders and visitors to LA have looked at the map of our rail system and thought, why is it like that? What's the point of having such a tiny little stub of a subway? The answer is basically that no one really intended for it to turn out like this. It's an accident of history, and the reason why it hasn't been extended until now is the story of one of the most bitter, drawn out political battles this city has ever seen. But to tell this story, we have to go back in time, back to an ancient period in the city's history that is poorly understood by historians today. It was a strange world when the air was thick with toxic fumes and danger lurked around seemingly every corner. But Donald Trump was still on TV a lot. That's right, it's the 1980s!
What was once a dream is fast becoming a reality. The long-awaited Metro Rail is on track and headed for Los Angeles.
In 1980, Los Angeles County voters approved Proposition a sales tax that would fund transportation projects around the county, including a new rapid transit system for the city. The success of the measure was the culmination of decades of attempts to secure support for mass transit, and now planning could move forward for what would become Metro Rail. The first line plan for the system was the Red Line, running from downtown to Hollywood to the San Fernando Valley. And it's just like the Red Line we know today. It would start at Union Station, run through downtown, then run west along Wilshire, continue all the way down to Fairfax, then turn north on Fairfax and go up to Hollywood. Wait, what? This isn't the Red Line. What the hell is this? Yeah, so the original plan for the Red Line was to take this kind of roundabout way to get to Hollywood, taking Wilshire, Fairfax, and then doubling back to Hollywood and then continuing on to the valley. Why? Well, Wilshire has basically always been the obvious first choice for a rapid transit line, going all the way back to monorail proposals from the 1960s. It's the densest corridor in the city with the highest concentration of jobs, and for a long period of time, a lot of urban planners looked at Wilshire as the only place in the city where it made sense to build a subway. So, most of the rail network plans drawn up in this period saw Wilshire as the necessary backbone of a future system. This first red line was trying to accomplish a lot of things simultaneously: connect all of these job centers on Wilshire, connect to Hollywood, another major center of activity, and connect all of that to the valley for the benefit of people commuting in from far away. So it's 1985. The plans have been drawn up, the funding is being secured, and we are on the cusp of groundbreaking. And then disaster struck.
From ABC News, The Weekend Report. Here's Tom Gerald.
In Los Angeles tonight, an explosion of unknown origin blew the roof off a department store filled with Sunday shoppers. At least 21 people were injured. More appeared buried beneath the rubble. At least 5 of the injured were critically burned and were rushed to the area hospitals for treatment. Fearing additional explosions, authorities evacuated hundreds of people from a 4-block area around that store.
On the afternoon of March 24th, 1985, a massive explosion ripped through a Ross Dress for Less store on the corner of 3rd and Fairfax. The windows were blown out, the roof partially collapsed on shoppers below, and 23 people were hospitalized. The cause turned out to be a dangerous buildup of methane in the basement of the store, which took just one errant spark to ignite. But how on earth did methane wind up here? Okay, so to explain that, we have to go just a little bit further back in time. Underneath this part of town is an oil field, one of several underneath Los Angeles. Millions of years ago, the entire Los Angeles basin was underwater. As organic matter sank to the ocean floor and then was buried under sediment, the resulting heat and pressure transformed that organic matter into fossil fuel. The most famous site associated with this particular oil field is right here, the La Brea tar pits, where highly viscous oil, or tar, is seeping to the surface through a fault line in the Earth's crust, and has been doing so for tens of thousands of years, inadvertently preserving the remains of animals that got stuck in the tar. But oil isn't the only byproduct of this process. Pockets of methane, which are formed from the breakdown of organic matter, are also formed, and they can also seep to the surface through fissures, fault lines, or abandoned oil drilling wells, of which there are many in this part of town. If not properly vented, the methane can accumulate into dangerous concentrations, which is exactly what happened at the Ross at 3rd and Fairfax. The explosion, pardon the pun, almost stopped the entire Red Line project dead in its tracks. Opponents of the project now had something vivid and terrifying to point to for why this project could not move forward. There was now fear that construction could set off methane pockets underground, or that methane could build up in the subway tunnels and be set off by a passing train. Now, there's some disagreement over this, but it seems like for the most part, most tunneling experts at the time agreed that tunneling could be done safely in this part of town as long as the proper precautions were taken. After all, there's already a lot of underground infrastructure in this part of town: sewer lines, flood control channels, underground parking garages, other stuff. Subway backers tried to reassure the public that their tunneling methods were safe and that the tunnels would be ventilated enough to prevent methane buildup. But the damage was already done. Opponents of the subway found a leader in Congressman Henry Waxman, who represented much of the West Side and was a powerful figure in local politics, essentially serving as a gatekeeper for federal money flowing into LA. The explosion and subsequent fallout turned him into an outspoken critic of the project, and without his support, federal funding for the Red Line was thrown into jeopardy. Through an act of Congress, Waxman pushed through a mandate that prohibited tunneling in a newly designated methane zone above the oil field. These fears over the dangers of subway construction were later reflected in pop culture, specifically the 1997 film Volcano, starring Tommy Lee Jones. In the movie, it turns out that there's a volcano underneath the La Brea tar pits. Tommy Lee Jones plays a first responder who has to manage the crisis and figure out how to contain the lava. Oh, and Don Cheadle's here too, but he never leaves this room. Anyway, at the end of the movie, they save the city by funneling the lava down Bayona Creek and into the ocean. Sorry, cyclists, your bike path is lava now. It's not really worth getting too deep into the plot of this movie because it's a pretty goofy disaster flick, but it is fascinating for being a hyper-local, hyper-specific reaction to the LA of the 1990s. Volcano was specifically reacting to three recent events: the 1994 Northridge earthquake, the 1992 riots, and the 1985 methane explosion. And I cannot emphasize this enough. This movie is so anti Metro.
Oh, God, this is so stupid. This city's finally paying for its arrogance.
Which particular arrogance is that?
Building a subway under land that's seismically active.
One of the subplots of the movie is that they're building the Red Line to Beverly Hills. In fact, they've already dug the tunnel all the way to the Beverly Center. At the start of the movie, there's a protest at the site of the future Beverly Center station that's evenly split between supporters and opponents of the subway. Because, that's how protests work. When the volcano erupts, a subway train gets trapped in the tunnel, and all the people inside have to be rescued. And then this poor guy, poor Norm Gunderson, who is the head of Metro or something. I really don't understand what this guy's job is because he's like all over the place, but he's just the movie's stand in for Metro as an agency. Anyway, earlier in the movie, he ignored Tommy Lee Jones' advice to stop running the trains until they could figure out what's going on. And for the grievous sin of not listening to the protagonist, he dies. He dies. He realizes the error of his ways, and Metro Man sacrifices himself to save the driver. Not Metro Man like Mega Mind, but like Metro. Like, forget it. Moving on. Afterwards, the lava races down the Red Line tunnel and explodes into a geyser outside the Beverly Center, threatening all of Beverly Hills. Gee, I wonder what that's a metaphor for. You build a subway to Beverly Hills, and look what happens. It brings crime. It brings lava. It it brought lava. Yeah. Okay, so back to reality. With subway construction literally banned in this part of town, planners had to come up with a new route that avoided the methane zone. So, a compromise was reached. While the planners came up with a new route, construction on the Red Line could move ahead and it would go as far down Wilshire as possible without hitting the methane zone, which meant Wilshire and Western. The Red Line was rerouted to go up Vermont and down Hollywood Boulevard, which was actually an alternate route that the planners had studied earlier, and one that the business community in Hollywood actually preferred. And honestly, that's not a bad outcome. For one, it's a more direct route from downtown to Hollywood, but Vermont is also a very busy transit corridor in its own right. In fact, it's the second busiest in the city behind Wilshire. It has major destinations like LA City College and the complex of hospitals at Vermont and Sunset. East Hollywood is a very dense neighborhood with a lot of transit riders. And because of the new route, it gained subway service decades before it might otherwise have. But it left this awkward stub of a subway line, which was later redesignated the Purple Line to more clearly differentiate it from the Red Line. One proposal was for it to swing south and continue west along Pico to avoid the methane zone, but the ridership projections just didn't pan out to justify that. Transit planners hoped that one day they'd be able to extend it, but without the political support or sufficient funding, the Purple Line remained stuck in place. Then, in the mid 2000s, the political winds turned. The new mayor made an extension of the Purple Line to Santa Monica a major priority, giving it a popular nickname that captured people's imaginations: the subway to the sea. Traffic on the west side had gotten bad enough that a lot of the local opposition to Metro just kind of faded. This renewed effort to bring rail service to the west side forced a re examination of the methane zone. An expert panel was put together to report to Congressman Waxman on the matter, and they unanimously found that tunneling under Wilshire was safe. Members of the panel did say that tunneling and gas detection methods had improved since the 1980s. However, in his book Railtown, The Fight for the Los Angeles Metro and the Future of the City, Ethan Elkind suggests that this rhetoric was more about providing political cover for Waxman. This copy is from the Central Library, by the way, which is why it looks like this. Quote, a couple of them thought that in the mid 1980s, it might not have been done safely because there were genuinely new techniques, but they didn't have those new techniques back then, Waxman explained. But when asked what the new developments in engineering were, the man who had diverted and almost stopped a then $3 billion subway line based on methane fears responded, you know, I have no idea. After being convinced that tunneling through the methane zone could, in fact, be done safely, Waxman introduced new legislation that lifted the ban on subway construction in his district. And after a long process of planning and securing funding, construction of the Purple Line extension started in 2014. Construction was, in and of itself, an incredibly difficult undertaking, tunneling through tar sands and uncovering massive fossils and unexpected obstacles that delay the process. But now we're just a few months away from the grand opening of the first phase of the extension, a dream finally realized after decades of attempts. And now that it's finally being extended, I think we can finally show some appreciation for the Purple Line stub. For the better part of a quarter century, the Purple Line has always been the other line, the short line, the frankly kind of useless line. But the very existence of the stub made its eventual extension far more feasible. Have you ever wondered why Wilshire Vermont Station has two floors? It's so the red and purple lines can cross over each other where they diverge, so that trains don't have to wait for another to pass. This is peak efficiency, but the short length of the purple line always made that efficiency kind of unnecessary. But now it won't be. We owe a debt of gratitude to the planners and builders back in the 80s and 90s for having the foresight to plan for the future, for understanding that even if they couldn't build their Wilshire subway back then, there would still be a need for it. That little stub has been optimistically pointing westward for 30 years now. So congratulations, Purple Line. You're a bit of a late bloomer. You had some stunted development, but you're finally becoming the man you were always meant to be.